Hi, Lori.
Hey.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing? Whoops.
Good.
Nope, it's okay. I think she asked both of us, so it's good.
Yeah. Anybody
Oh.
and all.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Oh, good.
Good. I'm enjoying our weather right now. It's almost 70 today, which is wonderful because we're supposed to get 10 inches of snow tomorrow.
Oh my gosh.
That's Colorado for you. I used to think that
Yes.
Texas weather was changeable. I knew nothing.
No, you're so right.
So there's no getting bored here. That's for sure.
No, it's gorgeous though.
Yeah.
Mm.
I know. I'm really enjoying it while it lasts. So,
Mhm.
and with the time change, it's my kids get home from school and they can actually play outside for a little while afterwards, which is really nice because
Oh, that's great.
that's the one positive I'm going to say about the time change. That's it. That's all I got.
Agree, Hannah.
The rest of it is coffee and perseverance.
I agree.
I'm happy about that, but so good. I heard that there's several states that have bills in the in Congress right now about that particular issue, and I'm like, could we not do this? I mean,
Really?
I feel like this is an issue everyone can get behind, and agree on, and bring everybody together.
Sure.
Violate the time change. I don't care which one you pick; just pick one and stick with it.
Yeah.
They actually say it's bad for your health.
Agreed. Yeah.
It really is.
It feels bad for my health.
It is. They
Yeah.
have, they are like the number of heart attacks and strokes and stuff go up and car accidents. And
Isn't that crazy?
I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
The number of people who fall asleep during Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
No. That's great. Yes, that's a definite. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, before I get started, I wanted to let everybody know, because I am putting this recording on the YouTube as well, that somebody asked me if there was a fee or some sort of payment they should offer for this study, and there is not, just so we're very clear. It's obviously public on the YouTube channel, so there's that. But I thought that was, it cracks me up sometimes, because I know that this ministry is sort of based on a terrible business plan. I'm aware, I've been told, and I'm okay with that, because I've realized that God brings what I need, and He is the provider, not always in the way or the direction I expect, or the time, but He does provide. And so I'm grateful for everybody who donates to make all this possible. And it's so fun to get to do this. Every day, I know people always go, man, I couldn't listen to all the stories like you. And I'm like, well, yeah, but I love them. I love the stories, and I love the people I get to work with, and I love all that. So it's a privilege for me. So there is that. So I want to get started and pray. Father, thank you for this time, for what you are bringing out of this study, for healing, for transformation, and for freedom. I pray that you would do a work through the words that I use, which will be clumsy and not enough to describe what I need to today. But I thank you that you can surpass those and speak to hearts. And I pray that you would. In Jesus' name, amen. So today, as I prepared for this, I got really nervous because today is, who is God? And that's a rather large topic, and it's a rather difficult topic, but it's so important. So as I got nervous, I kept asking the Lord to really make a way to, and of course, I can't describe and encompass who he is, but I'm hopeful that we can just take a glimpse at who he's not, and also who he is showing you he is. And I do think that he doesn't give us all of himself at once, because we wouldn't be able to contain that. We wouldn't be able to appreciate that. And so I feel like he gives us little glimpses here and there, and he's very gentle in revealing this. So who is God? First, we have to look at who he's not. I am going to send out to everyone this emotional concept of God, and it's sort of an idea that, so you have this rational concept of God, which is everything you have learned about him, whether it be from a Bible study or church or reading the Bible, or whatever somebody's taught you. This is all stuff that you have taken in and rationally have put somewhere in a file cabinet in your brain. And then there's this emotional concept of God, which is usually based on experiences and is usually very different than the rational concept. And we don't like that very much, because we want to believe good things about God, but what we feel is often what we really believe. So that's why it's important to kind of examine and look at this, because I think that we often have to learn through contrast. We have to learn what doesn't work. That was one thing that Mike Wells told me at one point when I was in school. He said, I was really frustrated with this class I was going through. And he said, I think you need to learn what doesn't work. And I said, well, I'm about over it, but I persevered. But anyway, there's this way that we humans work with this contrast. And so we need to look at who he's not. We usually decide that God is either a caricature of our past, whether that be father, mother, some other authority figure, or a sum of our bad experiences. Look at all the things that have happened in my life, therefore God must not care, this kind of thing. And I will, so the emotional God concept test is something that Mike Wells published in his Sidetracked in the Wilderness book. I've also seen other variations of it in different places. And so I've kind of reworked it for my own use. And I will go through that at the end with the homework and also kind of talk through it. But if you haven't taken it, and some of you have, I know. So if you haven't taken it, I would love for you to do that. If you have, that's great. You just use that information and we'll keep going. So this is what he's not. He's not passive. He's not abusive or unloving. He's not dismissive or disappointed. He's not condemning or tired of you. He's not irritable or impatient. He's not shaming. He's not manipulative. He's not disconnected. He doesn't have impossible standards that are rarely communicated. He's not a punisher. He's not a betrayer. And he's not an abandoner. Of course, there are a lot of other words we could throw in here, but these are some of the more common ones that I hear in terms of emotional concept of God. And so if he's not these characteristics, but you still feel like they are, what do? You can identify this, and that's a good start. But often what we do is we now try to put pressure on ourselves and condemn ourselves for believing these things about God. We think, oh my goodness, I can't believe this about him. This is awful. But then it just becomes another way of judging and guilt tripping and going into this tailspin that doesn't actually achieve anything. So first we have to admit where we are. I was talking to somebody after our last session about admitting where you were, and they said, I think that's the hardest thing for me. It's just so difficult to say, I am in the middle of the mess, or I'm not this nice facade that I've put up. Instead, I am icky back here. I feel this. This is really where I am. And just being honest is sometimes so difficult. Your emotional and your rational parts of your concept of God often are at war with each other. So you end up feeling divided. Because with your mind, you say, oh no, I should believe God. I should trust him. I should abide. I should. But with our emotions, we run the opposite direction, because if he's all this disappointed, condemning, and patient, yikes, I don't want to trust a God like that. And so you have to know where you are to know where you're going. Sometimes in admitting this, we're terrified of what God will think of us, which is kind of funny because he already knows where we are, but we still feel like we've hidden it from him somehow. We're afraid of what we'll have to face. If we really admit to ourselves, this is where we are, what's it going to take to get me somewhere else? That's really scary. We're afraid of being found out, of someone going, this is what you believe about God? Oh my goodness. You're a pastor, or you're a Christian, and you believe that, these kind of things, these implications. The thing is, he already knows. And when we pretend, we waste a whole lot of energy trying to prop up this image that we have for ourselves that doesn't do us any favors. And so we're always divided, because with our mind, we go, oh no, I should trust God. But with our emotions, we run the other direction. I just finished reading Philip Yancey's memoir. I don't know if any of you have read some of Philip Yancey's books. He writes a whole lot about suffering and a whole lot about grace. And I really appreciate him for those very honest, very vulnerable looks at some of these things that the church sometimes has glossed over. And it was really interesting to read his story, because a lot of that makes a lot of sense now. He grew up in a really legalistic community. His mother was very respected in the community, but she also raged at home with them. And so, of course, this was very confusing to him. And he worked through this very legalistic mindset of racism and, you don't dance, you don't roller skate because it's close to dancing, you don't do anything that looks like it could be anything bad. And came out the other side realizing that he was willing to ask the hard questions. And I think this is sometimes this part of admitting, we think that if we coat the outside, if we make it all pretty, then no one can see inside and it's fine. And yet God looks at it and goes, oh, you're so miserable. You're so miserable believing this thing that's not true. And you're not keeping appearances up for any good reason. And so let's admit where you are and dive in. And I love it because Yancey's just faced all head on, all the doubts and all the questions and all the things, and he's not afraid of them. And I think that that's really where change happens. And that's also where grace happens, because we realize that even through all our questions and all our doubts and all our stuff, we can keep bringing those to God. I find that often we beat up on emotion, or we beat up on what we think, or some of these things, instead of, I think it's more about where we put it. God, this is what I believe about you. Here you go. Let's give it to him and bring it to him, because he's the one who's going to do something about it. I'm afraid of this. Well, here you go. I'm going to give this to you. Because it's not just, as we've talked about before, don't be afraid. It's don't be afraid, come to me. Don't be afraid, bring your requests to me. Don't be anxious, come here, And so we're always in this place where what we do with it is more important than keeping up the image of we've got it all together and we never have doubts and we never have questions. It just doesn't work. So first, we've admitted where we are. Second, ask him to change it. It's not your job to fix this. Thank goodness. Because when Mike Wells first did my emotional God concept, this was when I first moved to Colorado. So it's been about 18 years ago. And he filled up the whole page of stuff. It was real ugly. And there was something he kept bringing out that was, okay, you've admitted it. That's good. And I was pretty sure he was going to kick me out of my office and or out of his office and never talk to me again. Because how ugly is that? But instead it was, okay, now let's see what God's going to do. And as Sherry Roberts pointed out on a recent podcast interview I did with her, hope in the Bible means expectation. And this is interesting because I think sometimes we approach this emotional concept of God like, okay, you just let me know, like, I don't want to hear, I don't want to see, I don't want to enter into this at all. Instead of this attitude of, well, I got nothing else. So whatever you've got, I need you to do this because I can't fix this. I don't want to feel this way about you because I don't think it's true, but it feels true. And so we're bringing it to him to allow him to clean it out. He knows we need to be led by truth, and he's the shepherd. He leads, and he seeks the lost lambs, and he searches for the lost coins, and he looks for the buried treasure. He doesn't leave you where you are. It's one thing that I've noticed about the faithfulness of God is he is often very faithful to bring circumstances into my life in which I know him. That does not mean they're fun. But I do believe that every day he puts us in the best place to know him. It's whether or not we are willing to see it. And sometimes I am, and sometimes I'm not, honestly. Sometimes I'm like, no, I'm good. I'd rather believe the lie for now. Thank you. But he's always faithful to continue to present that to me and say, look, this is who I am. This is who I am. That's not it. Third, I think we start to realize that it's just sort of this opening a door. I used to picture it like if you have a brick wall and you just take one little brick out and that's it. You kind of wave at him through the bricks, like, okay, this is about as far as I'm willing to go, but I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to turn. I'm willing to be available to what you show me. And I'm willing to invite you into this mess. I'm not going to try to make it pretty. I'm not going to put makeup on it or dress it up or make it look okay. I'm going to recognize that I don't have enough. I don't have enough to believe the right things about God even. Yep, absolutely. I don't. And so I need him to bring faith. I need him to bring faithfulness. I need him to bring all these things that will show me who he is. And he's so tender in that because he's a good father. We'll talk about that in a minute. So who is he? Talked about who he isn't. And we talked about how we change that a little bit or are available for him to change it. What will he show you as you are available to this? And I realize that as I read through these, some of them you're not willing or ready to take on. And that's okay. That's again the thing. There is no rush in this. I remember way back in my undergrad, I had this Bible teacher who would say, God's not in a hurry. He grows things. And we had these little wooden acorns that we took around everywhere for a while because his communication was, we are always such mad dash to the finish line to try to finish this off and to try to get to the goal and to try to sort ourselves out. And God doesn't do things that way. He takes a while. He's got his own timeline, but he's always moving and working and doing. We just don't always see it. So who is he? He's a loving father and love itself. 1 John 4:7-8. Those who are loved by God, let his love continually pour from you to one another, because God is love. Everyone who loves is fathered by God and experiences an intimate knowledge of him. The one who doesn't love has yet to know God, for God is love. And then Ephesians 3:14-16, which is some of my favorite verses right now. So I kneel humbly in awe before the Father of our Lord Jesus, the Messiah, the perfect Father of every father and child in heaven and on the earth. And I pray that he would unveil within you the unlimited riches of his glory and favor until supernatural strength floods your innermost being with his divine might and explosive power. Mic drop, right? He is a good father. And sometimes we look at him and we go, no, you're not. I don't like what you did. You know, I think there's often this place where we want to say that's not love. And we want to define love. The problem with that is that if God is love, he sort of defines it, right? But some of this stuff we look at and we go, this doesn't feel loving, right? I know there is a lot of things with my kids that I do that don't feel loving. Before I came up here just now, my daughter has a homework sheet that she is sitting in front of and not very happy about. It does not feel like love to her for me to require her to do this homework sheet. But I know that this is part of her learning. This is part of her school. This is part of something that she needs. And so I require it of her. Does that make me an awful mom? No, but she sure feels that way sometimes, right? And so there's this idea that, and some of us too, that the idea of father is confusing because maybe you haven't had a very good father experience in your life, like a biological father. Maybe you've had an abusive father, or a father who wasn't there, who abandoned you, or so many of these other varieties where you look at it and you go, father, ugh, that gives me the creeps, you know? But that's not who he is. A good father. And I love how he teaches us who he is as father to the fatherless. There are several people that I've talked to, either who have been through adoption and don't know who their biological father is, or lost him early on. And that father to the fatherless concept is so important because he steps in and says, I will be your father. And I will do all the things that a father does. What does that mean? I want you to ask him. But there's things like protection, provision, support, cheering you on. There's a whole lot in that as you unpack it. But that's something that he has to reveal to you. What else? He's not condemning, for he has taken all the condemnation. So if ever there is a point, and this is where some of the ways that I start to deal with legalism in my own life is anytime I feel condemnation, I know I'm in the wrong place because he's taken the condemnation, right? Different than conviction. And we can talk about conviction. I would say conviction and false guilt, are different. Condemnation is part of that false guilt mess. That's that piece where, and this is how I define it. Conviction is when the Holy Spirit puts his finger on something and says, that was stupid. And you go, yep, that was stupid. You're right. I'm sorry. Everything after that is false guilt and condemnation. It's this idea that we're going to keep piling it on and keep refocusing and keep beating up on ourselves so that maybe one day we'll get it better. We're going to fix this flesh. Doesn't work. So Romans 8:1. So now the case is closed. There remains no accusing voice of condemnation against those who are joined in life union with Jesus, the Anointed One. It's pretty matter of fact, isn't it? What else? He's good. He's a promise keeper, faithful, trustworthy, ready to receive you. Psalm 100, verse 5. For Yahweh is always good and ready to receive you. He's so loving that it will amaze you, so kind that it will astound you. And he is famous for his faithfulness towards all. Everyone knows our God can be trusted, for he keeps his promises to every generation. Now, I would like to insert a caveat here that a lot of times, this is something I hear a lot. Well, he's not keeping his promises to me, right? He's not doing what I've asked him this over and over and over, and he has not given it to me. And I think so often we want comfort. Honestly, I do. I would like to be comfortable. God, That's really what I want. All this suffering stuff and the discomfort and the annoyances, can we just deal with all of that? Except that's not what he's promised in life. And you know what I was thinking about today in Job, when, I mean, talk about a guy who has suffered. This guy has been through the ringer, right? And everything, and I see him standing there going, why? And I've done that before. You probably have too. And we want an answer to the why. We want a reason or a lesson or a something, you know? And it kind of is interesting to me the way God answers Job, because he doesn't give him a why, does he? He just says, I am. He says it a lot longer than that. And he does it in a way that's, you know, kind of like, hey, where were you when I made all this stuff, you know? But it's very much this, I am. And that to our minds is so frustrating because we want a why. And he just says, I am. I am good. I am a promise keeper. What does that mean? Well, the promises he is keeping, and it's interesting, for some reason, Corrie ten Boom came up a lot as I was preparing this lesson. I love that woman. I've read so much of her stuff. She amazes me, partially because of her honesty. She never comes across as this super spiritual person who just made it through this prison camp with no problems at all. I love how she describes her sister that way, but half the time she's going, I'm going to kill him. I'm over it. I'm mad. I'm not going to forgive anybody. This is stupid. And she's just very honest about it. But one of the things she said was, and I mean, this woman has seen the pit of hell on earth, right? And lived it. And she said, we don't keep God to his promises enough. Every one of those promises he's given in the Bible, he is bringing about. And I heard that and I was like, ooh, that seems like a very bold statement. I don't know that I would make that one. She's not wrong. And if you haven't seen the promises of God fulfilled in your life yet, well, two things. One is it may still be coming, you know, and we're not done yet. And I know it gets wearying praying for it over and over and over, but there's something about that prayer that brings us to him, right? And that's his answer to all the whys is me. You got me. I don't have what I want. I know, but you've got me. And so we start coming back for him instead of what he can give us. But also, there's this passage in Hebrews, which is tough, right? The people who have not received the thing that they wanted, and they go to heaven that way. But there is something in that as God looks at them and says, wow, look at them. He's amazed. And again, we have him. And so I believe that somewhere in there, those promises are fulfilled. It may just not be in your lifetime or in the time that you want it to happen. In Psalm 145:13, says, you are the Lord who reigns over your never-ending kingdom throughout all ages of time and eternity. You are faithful to fulfill every promise you've made. You manifest yourself as kindness in all you do. Weak and feeble ones you will sustain. Those bent over with burdens of shame, you will lift up. You have captured our attention and the eyes of all who look to you. You give what they hunger for at just the right time. Not in our time, I would point out, but at the right time. When you open your generous hand, it's full of blessings, satisfying the longings of every living thing. You are fair and righteous in everything you do, and your love is wrapped into all your works. You draw near to those who call out to you, listening closely, especially when their hearts are true. Every godly one receives even more than what they ask for you hear what their hearts really long for, and you bring them your saving strength. And that's where I think so often what we think we want may not be what we really want in the end. And so, and I know that's a hard one, and I'm not always satisfied with that either. But I do believe one way or the other, he is faithful and he is keeping his promises, and he's showing up in bringing himself to me every day, regardless of whether or not I have what I want. He has our good in mind always. That's another hard one, isn't it? Romans 8:28. So we are convinced that every detail of our lives is continually woven together for good, for we are his lovers who have been called to fulfill his designed purpose. In his book, The Reason for God, Belief in an Age of Skepticism, Timothy Keller, he says, the basic premise of religion, that if you live a good life, things will go well for you, is wrong. Jesus was the most morally upright person who ever lived, yet he had a life filled with the experience of poverty, rejection, injustice, and even torture. So the good that we are looking for may not be the good that he has in mind. And that's a difficult one when we're suffering and we're hurting and we look at it and we go, this just hurts so much. I don't know. I don't know how to do this. Well, he may not provide the way out right then. I believe it's coming, but in that he will be enough for that moment, right? And that's where I say the moments get very small when we're in suffering. And we don't do next week or next month or next year. We do now. And this is all I can muster is right now. Jesus, be enough for right now. And then we'll deal with the next moment in a minute, you know, and things are allowed to get really small. And I do think that's a way of, there's sweetness in that, because it's this moment by moment walking where I am completely dependent on him for my very being in this moment. And it doesn't feel very good, but there is a depth and a maturity that I think comes out of that that is valuable. And by the way, the goal is to know him, right? Not that we have comfort our whole lives, that we do it all right, that we avoid all suffering, you know, that none of those are his goals. And really knowing him, again, that's our good. That's where life is found. And so often we say, why? And he says, I'm here. And we say, no. I said, why? He says, I'm here. And it is not necessarily the answer we want, but I believe if we push into that, it will be. He is emotionally connected and approachable. Isaiah 63:9. I love this verse. When they suffered, this was Israel, he suffered with them. Out of his enduring love and compassion, he redeemed them. He lifted them up, carried them in his arms, and cared for them all the days of old. There's another translation that says, in their affliction, he was afflicted. And I don't know what it is about the word affliction, but it just encompasses suffering so greatly. And then Hebrews 4:14-16. So then we must cling in faith to all we know to be true. For we have a magnificent King Priest, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who rose into the heavenly realm for us and now sympathizes with us in our frailty. He understands humanity, for as a man, our magnificent King Priest was tempted in every way just as we are and conquered sin. So now we draw near freely and boldly to where grace is enthroned, to receive mercy's kiss and discover the grace we urgently need to strengthen us in our time of weakness. He's not afraid of our weakness. He doesn't want us to cover it up. He wants us to bring it to him. He's a provider. John 6:35. Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. Come every day to me, and you will never be hungry. Believe in me, and you will never be thirsty. One of the things that Mike Wells had me do when I first did my emotional God concept with him was, he said, I want you to sit down and go through every word of the Gospels and figure out what Jesus says about himself and write it down, and then ask him how he is that to you. And that was really foundational for me, because I had never really considered I mean, it's nice that you're the bread of life. That's great. Super duper. You fed the 5,000. But what about me? How does that translate to me? And I had heard people talk about, these miraculous provisions. And this isn't just, financially, obviously, there's a whole lot of things, time, energy, after daylight savings time, energy, those kind of things. But there's this, I remember many years ago when my husband and I bought our first house, and we bought it during the recession. And so there were all these short sales, and it was just really hard to get anything done in terms of buying a house. We had no money. We probably shouldn't have bought the house in the first place, but I was going to have a baby. So we were kind of determined. And so we bought the house, and I started looking around at all the things that needed to be fixed. And this wasn't stuff I wanted to be fixed. This was stuff that needed to be fixed. Things like the water heater was 40 years old and ready to explode. The tub that my baby would be taking a bath in was scratched and rusted, and I couldn't think of putting a baby in there. Just one thing after another. Furnace, the whole shebang. And I thought, there's no way. I have no idea how we're going to do this. I had just gone onto support because I was working with Abiding Life Ministries, but I was completely supported, if that makes sense. And so it was just whatever came in. My husband was painting houses, which at the time was a really bad deal. I remember one day he came home with a paycheck for the whole week of $100. And I said, oh, oh no. So I'm on support. He's painting houses. And eventually he did get a job through the fire department, which was great. But at this stage of the game, I made a list. I made a list of all the things that needed to be done to the house. And then I put the list away because I said, this is just depressing and I don't want to look at this anymore because I have no idea how this is going to work. Believe me, there was no faith. Okay. Just let's be clear about that. I just kind of went, I'm just going to ignore it. A year later, I found that list, and nothing had changed for us financially really during that time. Support had been okay, but not like I didn't get any giant gifts of anything. Jobs hadn't changed. Nothing had changed during that year. And I found this list, and do you know, every single thing on that list was done. And I have no idea how. I have not one clue. But God's economy provided for something that made no sense. And I love the way he, even when there's no faith, goes, all right, I'm going to show you how I do this. Now, that doesn't mean, and this is why I say I didn't have a lot of faith. It doesn't mean if you have more faith, then he'll do more stuff for you, right? That's not how this works. Because again, the provision is himself. He is going to be available for this. So if you need this stuff done and he knows that, he may do it this way. Do you know he's done it completely different ways other times in my life and left me with nothing? And that's okay too, because he showed up eventually, And so there was always this place where he's saying, I'm faithful, I'm the provider. And of course, Philippians 4:19, I'm convinced that my God will satisfy every need you have. For I have seen the abundant riches of glory revealed to me through Jesus Christ. I love the detail, the focus on detail that God has in our lives. That's one thing I'm passionate about, is figuring out how this Christian life, where the rubber meets the road on this Christian life, right? Let's not do it over here just in church. How does it meet me today in this, in parenting, in doing my job, in dealing with parents or friends or whatever it is that you're dealing with? How does he meet me in that? And how does he provide for me in that? And I would love for you to start expecting that provision, because he will provide. He's an empowerer. It means you don't have to be afraid of weakness, right? Or lacking. Philippians 4:12-13. I know what it means to lack, and I know what it means to experience overwhelming abundance. For I'm trained in the secret of overcoming all things, whether in fullness or in hunger. And I find that the strength of Christ's explosive power infuses me to conquer every difficulty. It's okay if you don't feel that confident. I would point out, though, that Paul, he didn't have a super awesome life that led him to this place, right? The way he was trained in the secret of overcoming all things was by being faced with all things, right? And finding Christ's explosive power that got him through. And so if you are in a place where you don't have enough, that's great. That's a place where instead of acting in desperation to try to get enough or to try to shut down because we just can't deal with it anymore or whatever, we turn and we say, I'm coming to you because I don't have enough. And I'm not going, and this is why Paul can end up talking about how he boasts in his weakness. I don't always want to boast in my weakness, but there is something in this that he is saying, in this place of weakness, I get him and I get to know him. And that's the whole point. And so this is exciting. This life isn't the main event. This is boot camp, right? This is preparation. And so in that preparation, we get to see him be enough in each one of these things. Why? I don't know. Because he is. He's a safe place, a wraparound shield. Psalm 119, 114, very long psalm. You're my place of quiet retreat, and your wraparound presence becomes my shield as I wrap myself in your word. Oh, I love that. No matter where we go, no matter what we're faced with, he is the wraparound presence. And in some ways, we become invincible because nothing can steal that from us. There was this woman, and I'm blanking on her name right now. She was Hungarian, and she ended up in a prison camp during World War II. And what her mother told her before she went in was, she was Jewish, was nobody can steal from you what's in your mind. She said, they can take everything else, right? They can hurt your body. They can take all your possessions. They can exhaust you. They can make you sick. They can do all these other things, but nobody can take that. And I would go deeper and say, no one can steal the safety of your spirit. And so when you feel unsafe, go to that little place, that place of quiet retreat found in him, and say, I need you to be my shield. I need to be safe here. And there's something about that as he carries us that we can rest, right? And not strive and not fight. He's faithful. Lamentations 3:23. God's loyal love couldn't have run out. His merciful love couldn't have dried up. They're created new every morning. How great is your faithfulness? I'm sticking with God. I say it over and over. He's all I've got left. That's from the Message, by the way, the Message translation. He's merciful. For my thoughts about mercy are not like your thoughts, and my ways are different than yours. As high as the heavens are above the earth, so my ways and my thoughts are higher than yours. That's Isaiah 55:8-9. And I wanted to read the footnote in the Passion Translation because I thought this was so cool. In the context, the thoughts of God are in reference to compassion, mercy, and forgiveness. Man's thoughts of mercy are not God's. Man's mercy runs out, but God's mercy is higher than the heavens. God's mercy and forgiveness are generous and abundant. I think I often look at that verse as he's unexplainable, his ways are higher, or his thoughts are higher than my thoughts, and his ways are whatever. And that's true too. But this is talking about his mercy and his compassion. And so whenever we bring condemnation on ourselves or any of these other things, he's saying, no, my mercy is way bigger than yours is. So let's come to me for that. Also, if you need mercy for someone else, go to him because it's going to be way bigger than your mercy. So this is just a little taste of some of these things that of course this doesn't encompass who God is totally. This is just little tidbits that he's shared with me that I enjoy so much. And the result of it really for me is that I don't feel like I have to show up for God anymore. I I am in love. I talked to this woman the other day who had been watching the Chosen series. I don't know if you guys have seen this. It's a story about Jesus. It's a TV show about Jesus. I think it's great. And she is not a believer. She's actually an atheist. And she had been watching it, and she said, "Do you know? I'm falling in love with him every time I watch this." And of course, tears just poured down my face, and I was like, "I know, me too." But it's this sweetness of, you don't have to come to me. You're not forced or strong-armed or legalized or whatever else. You come because you're in love. And he starts to set this in front of you and says, "This is why I am faithful. I am merciful. I love you. I welcome you. I receive you with open arms." That, I believe, is how he woos us, how he brings us to a place where we don't show up just to be used by him, which is a term that I really don't like, but instead because we love him. And we recognize that his love fills us up and spills over to all the people around us. So don't be worried if you don't buy this yet. That's okay. Or if he hasn't revealed it to you yet, because I really do believe it's revelation. Revelation is like birth, right? It can't be rushed. Those last few weeks of being pregnant are like the worst ones. And everyone's just like, just get it out, just get it out, just get it out. But we can't rush it. We can't rush these things. He grows this within us, and it's uncomfortable, and we don't like the time it takes, and then it's birthed in pain most of the time, right? Revelation is often birthed in pain, and it stinks, and we go, no, I'm good, I'm tapping out. And yet we do it again because it is totally worth it. We walk away with this treasure of a depth of something he's revealed to us that we didn't have before. And that is worth all the pain. His goal in this life is that we know him. So it's a pretty big deal, right? This is eternal life, that you know me. It's a big deal. But he knows we can't handle it all at once. He's very good about bringing things in the time that we need. And so we can trust him to bring this. And I know some of you go, yeah, but I want it like yesterday. And could we just move along with this thing? But I know that that's often my heart's desire too. But I also know that as a good father, he knows when it's time to give it to me. There's this story, this is Corrie ten Boom again. I told you it was a theme. She used to travel on the train with her father as a child. He was a watchmaker. And so he would get on the train, I think it was once a week, and he would take the train down to this main clock at this city that set the time for every other clock, right? And he would go down there, he'd set his watch to whatever time exactly this clock was at, and then he would make the trip home. And sometimes Corrie, as a child, would go with him. And one day she asked him a question, and I think it was something sexual, and she had heard something at school and wasn't sure what to do with it. And he said, he didn't answer her question right away. He said, "Corrie, could you pick up my briefcase and bring it on the train?" And she looked at him and she said, "Dad, that briefcase is so heavy. I can't carry that." She was 7 or 8 years old at the time. And he goes, "Yeah, this information that you're asking me for, it's too heavy too. But one day you'll be old enough to receive it. You'll be old enough to carry it. And when that time comes, you'll get it." And I love that idea of this father who is protecting us from too much. He's waiting and giving the revelation as we need it, but in the time frame that he knows is best for us. So I really want you to dig into these things we've talked about and apply it to you personally. How are you my safe place, God? How are you providing for me? How are you loving me? We need it to be individual and applicable to life right now. It's one of the things I love about Jesus. As you read through the Gospels, he was never this far off, weird concept teacher. He taught using things that people knew: sheep and coins and seeds. You know, he used parables, which weren't always that clear, I'll be real, but he used things that were tangible and that made sense to these people. So ask him to help this make sense in you, for you to start to understand the process as he guides you into this place of changing up this emotional concept of who he is. So your homework, number one is, if you haven't taken the God concept test, please do. And I will email the questions out to those who are taking. And if you don't get an email from me regularly, you can always shoot me an email and I will send that to you. And start to define the characteristics of your emotional concept of God, because we're admitting where we are, right? And that's the first step in that. And then come to him admitting what you feel and thus believe about him. Recognize it, recognize that this makes you divided, but it also makes you normal. I have not done this test with one person who has come back saying that they connect the two. And I do think that's often because life experiences blow this out of the water for us. But he is very faithful to start to teach us who he is. If somebody believes something about me that's not true, I want to go in and fix it, right? I want to be like, no, that's so not me. Let me tell you who I am. And I believe God's the same way. And he is very willing to come in and do this because he knows we need it. Meditate on some of the characteristics we've talked about today, asking him for how they apply personally to you and how he shows you who he really is. And understand you may not get the answer right away. I've probably told this story, but I remember one day when Mike Wells told me he had finally gotten an answer to a question that he had asked 25 years prior. And I went, 25 years? Really? Super. But the thing that freed up in me with that is I don't have to have the answer today. It may not come today. It may not come tomorrow. It may not come for 25 years. I hope it comes before then, but I used to think it was my fault. You know, if I didn't get the answer, it was because I wasn't doing it right. Instead of saying, here's my question, I'm going to leave this before you and you'll answer me when you get to it. You know, when it's time, when I'm ready, you'll answer and you'll show me what this looks like. All right, let's pray. Father, I pray for each of these women as they take who you are, who they believe you are, to you and say, I don't know what to do with this. I feel like you're hurting me. I feel like you're not a promise keeper. I feel like you're putting me through horrible things and making me miserable and suffer. And I need to know that you're a loving Father, that you love me, that you have a plan for me, and that you are faithful and steadfast and you never lie. I need to know these things. And I pray that you would do this in the way that you only can, that you would bring revelation, and through the revelation that you would bring a deep love for you. Thanks in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, ladies. Good to see you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.